Yo, yo, yo. This is Dylan Oros, your friendly neighborhood writer, and this is Author Diary number 2. And the topic of today's Author Diary shall be my upcoming horror anthology, horror, dark fantasy, and weird fiction, as you can see here. Literally called Anthology, but spelled differently. It's the combination of anthology, a collection of stories, and apogee, which means peak or the summit of something. And yeah, today I created this website, which I thought was a good idea for a short story collection because it's not just one pitch. In this case, it's 23 pitches. There's 23 stories, there's 23 different topics, different ideas. And this website just serves as a rundown through not only the story pitches, like a one-sentence story pitch for each. I'm not trying to spoil too much, obviously. And then also a collection of all the art and the quotes and the mood board type material that I had compiled while I was writing this and preparing it and now revising it. It's a way for me to solidify how this book is going to look. And as you can see, there's 2 different sections, Primordio and Mundamania. It's 2 different halves of the collection. And yeah, I'm just going to give a little background and talk through the collection. So let's get into it. This is Anthology. It's horror, it's dark fantasy, it's weird fiction by yours truly, Dylan Oros. The subheading here I have is 23 Tales of Eclipses and Nightmares, Weirdo Shamans and Killer Puppets, Lovelorn Witches and Sentimental Sorcerers, a Jester who plays his victims like instruments, and a field trip to a crash-landed UFO. It's 23 stories in all, 93,000 words, and it's releasing here in spring Q2 2026, so I'm aiming to release it in May, so this next month. And the revisions are going nicely. It's pretty much done. And that's something I will say is a little bit more preamble on Anthology. This was an idea I had back in the summer of 24 when I started to compile and take seriously my writing ambitions, my different ideas for mostly novels, but a few of them there's some screenplays in there, like writing some movie type ideas. There's a animated series / animated movie idea that I have. And then there's also this collection of short stories, which is originally how I got my start in writing, and how I learned to write fiction was trying my hand at writing short stories, and specifically writing my main inspiration for what the impetus for me coming up with ideas and stories was the Twilight Zone, which we'll get into in here in the introduction, is that is one of the primary inspirations for this collection and just my whole writing career and imagination. But I will say, Anthology, while I was writing it, this was the first time I started to look into submitting short stories to magazines and to short fiction contests. I don't remember when I did it, but at some point I subscribed to Scribophile's like newsletter. Scribophile, if you're not familiar, it's a site where you can submit your writing, you can critique other people's writings. It's basically like an exchange for critiques, but they also include just like writing resources. And on their newsletter, they have a long list released every month that shows you all of the magazines and online publications, like the new iteration of like Weird Tales, like back in the 20th century, a lot of writers got their start submitting to magazines and getting short stories in sci-fi magazines. Like Isaac Asimov ran a magazine, and Weird Tales is where a lot of Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, Solomon Kane, and Conan, where they got a lot of their stories published and where they started to get known. So there's a rich tradition of short fiction magazines, but I was under the false impression for a long time. I'd never looked into them because I just thought that didn't exist anymore and it was kind of gone. But you'd be surprised, and Scribophile is kind of my window into how many magazines are out there that are accepting short fiction submissions on a regular basis, or doing it seasonal. And that's why keeping up with the newsletter was useful, because it is kind of haphazard when they open up to submissions and when they're grading magazines versus when they're on an off period. So it's good to know. It's good to know that that's still out there. So while I was writing Anthology, I started researching that and I started compiling the stories to be ready to submit to magazines. And I actually did get a few published, which I showcase here in the website, which ones ended up getting into a magazine. And that was a useful endeavor because, while most of them got rejected, of course, I learned how to not only pitch and like basically query short stories to a magazine. I also was forced with the mindset knowing I was going to try to submit these to magazines. It changed how efficiently I wrote the story and how I got through revisions quicker and how I ended up with a polished product a lot faster to be able to submit versus if I was just like, oh, I'm just doing this for fun. Anthology will be this short story collection that I'll release as a book years from now or a year from now. I was doing it in a more immediate way. I was like, okay, that's true. I will try to create a book later, which this is what this is now. But at that time, I was like, it would be nice to start getting published in some magazines, getting my name out there. And a lot of them are free. Some of them are paid. Of course, if you're a writer, you understand how difficult it is for everyone and how these magazines aren't making any money either, so they can't afford to pay people. So it's about exposure. But some of them do pay. Anyways, yeah, that's a little preamble about like Anthology was also something where I was getting more serious and professional about how I presented myself. And it was a great learning experience. And I'd recommend it if anybody out there writes short fiction, look into Scribophile's newsletter or just, Google what are some online magazines, online publications that are doing submissions and look into it. Try to get your magazine to publish your story. So let's get started. I'll start with the introduction. This is a piece by Caspar David Friedrich. It's the Cemetery Entrance, which is one of my cover prototypes, which I'll display at the end. Just a really ominous, liminal painting that I love the color of. It's very fall themed. There's like this mysterious forest, the slant in the earth you see. It's obelisks, kind of some weird debris here. And if you look here, there's almost like a apparition of either a face or like a butterfly. There's a wreath. Looks like there should be flames here, but they've been put out. Really, really powerful image. I think it's maybe the number one favorite for becoming the cover. And the anthology also sits here like a sign, like an actual sign on the threshold here. But that's meant to represent you. When you enter Anthology, you're crossing a threshold into a new zone of experience. And here I have printed out my actual complete introduction that I've already written for Anthology that's going to appear in the print book itself or in the ebook itself in the first pages. I love writing introductions for my short story collections. I haven't written any introductions for my novels because I don't want to. I don't think they need them. But for the short story collections, it's a way for me to explain kind of my aesthetic and my motivation, my inspirations. And this introduction also serves as a way to introduce these two figures here that inspired me to be a writer, really, and are a continuous inspiration for stories like these. So I'm just going to read my introduction here without any further commentary, and then we'll move on to the stories. Anthology equals anthology, collection of literary works, plus apogee or peak. Anthology was originally conceived of as something akin to Clive Barker's Books of Blood series, a collection of a storyteller's core aesthetic boldly spread across a variety of tales. They may satisfy all yearnings and cravings of a diabolical nature. Another major inspiration is Rod Serling's A Night Gallery, the horror-themed anthology show wherein the wizened master of the weird tours a hall of lurid paintings. In either case, by page or canvas, the guest knows they are in for a saga of grisly treats. Rod and Clive are brilliant examples of the kind of artist I set out to be. Fearless, bold, and endlessly imaginative. This book of stories is dedicated to them. There's Rod in the Night Gallery, and there's Clive. For my collection, I wanted to make a volume of superbly macabre horror fiction, weird and dark fantasy inclusive, one able to stretch supremely into every archetype my imagination desires. Clive's brand of sublime horror is a major aspiration for me. Barker's willingness to get into the psychosexual meat and potatoes of demonical human matters is a cherished through line in how I think about the occult and storycraft itself. The imaginer must be willing to go there in order to make maximal impact. In horror, or in the setup of any good joke, you must craft a believable enough encounter, featuring brightly lit caricatures, in order to properly prepare for the damnable in-game threshing you have in store, spilling guts, laughter, or viscera. Hee hee. The stories gathered here were conceived as one unit from the beginning to fulfill archetypes and satisfy specific literary desires. Some of the tales are interconnected by circumstance or character. I hope you will find the tales well-paced and through lines worthy of your voraciously enterprising mind. Let us co-create these ancient battlefields and noonday demons together, using our imaginal realms as one for a short spell. Look forward to eclipses and nightmares, weirdo shamans and killer puppets, lovelorn witches and sentimental sorcerers, a jester who plays his victims like instruments, and a field trip to a crash-landed UFO. Look forward to indulging yourself utterly in the irresistibly impossible. I reckon Anthologee should be read in the spirit of a trickster's lusty recounting, as pernicious jest told by the light of campfire cinders, or as painfully impassioned scrawlings by one such living book of blood, me, that yet persists in storing out the fates of most inauspicious souls. Anthologee is separated into 2 volumes of relatively equal length: Primordio, 9 short stories plus 1 novella, and Mundamania, 13 short stories. The former latches onto beginnings and endings, gods and myths, the ancient soils wedded by source. The latter features modernized tales of brutal malevolence and inspirited occult chicanery inside classrooms and convention centers and catacombs and ill-fated connections, either mundane or inhumane. I sincerely hope you enjoy Anthologee, my book of dark delights. Not everyone will survive the night, but remember, some ghosts may be coming out better than they just had it. In reading and writing, as in all things, please use your soul as sole authority. Godspeed, Dylan. So that's my introduction to the collection, and I think it prepares the mind in some way and gives a little insight into my process. So hope you enjoyed that, and we'll get into the pitches here for the stories. And this is a good example of, these are the types of images, quotes, mood board type items that I've interspersed now. It's still only a fraction of the actual what my document is, but I created this giant Google Doc to help me outline the stories as I was writing them. And as I said in the introduction, each story is like an archetype where whenever I was coming up with Anthologee, I had a framework of a tone, a framework, an aesthetic sense for what I wanted this collection to be, which is unlike Supernal Stories, which is me compiling my old blog posts of my short fiction, and it's kind of very random and haphazard. And Supernal Stories, each of those volumes, I've released the first 2 here last year. Those are very much me collecting stories from across 7 years of writing and kind of trying to curate them into books that make sense, but it's still very much, it's all over the map. There's some horror, there's some weird fiction, there's some fantasy, there's some like surreal literary stuff going on. Anthologee, on the other hand, was conceived from the beginning. I want this to be horror. I want this to be my books of blood, and what a bold thing to say. Clive Barker's literally one of the best writers ever. The thing I'll say about Clive is, and what inspires me after reading some of his work, Weave World was the book that really opened my mind. Hellbound Heart was the first thing I read by Barker. Actually, that's not true. Cabal was the first thing I read by Barker when I was too young. I checked it out at the library because I thought it sounded cool. And me and my brother knew who Clive Barker was because we had played Clive Barker's Undying. The first contact with Barker was actually, if you don't count seeing like the Hellraiser movie cover at like Blockbuster and getting like freaked out by it, because that happened to me, just like it happened to every kid. I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. So my first contact was seeing Pinhead at Blockbuster and being like, what the heck is that? And getting really freaked out. I remember getting chills up my spine when I saw Pinhead for the first time. And then I didn't watch Hellraiser until 20 years after that. I never watched the movie. So I just had that image of him. And then me and my brother, we played Clive Barker's Undying on PC. One of those random games we bought at Best Buy, we just thought it looked cool. It's like, because that's how you chose games back then, is you just say, look at this Cold Step Saga. It's a Xbox used game at GameStop that is Monopoly and Magic the Gathering. It's like, Clive Barker's Undying. It's like Resident Evil on a weird island, and you're discovering this family history. I need to replay it, but yeah, Clive Barker's Undying. He also has a few other Jericho. He's in the video game space. And I checked out Cabal from the library, which is the basis. It's a short story or novella basis of Nightbreed. If you've seen that movie, one of the great horror movies, honestly. It's like a heroic bloodshed horror movie, really, with Cronenberg in it as an actor. But I digress. I will just say that Clive Barker is important to me because his prose and his ability to write really engaging And obviously people think of Clive Barker, think of Hellraiser, they think of Candyman too, he wrote. Yes, he is about blood and guts and gore and all the nasty stuff, yes. But like Cronenberg, Barker has an intellectual razor's edge where he perfectly uses this really gnarly material to tell things about the human spirit and to really dig into like occult knowledge. And occult knowledge meaning like hidden realities, invisible worlds, fantastique, how reality can bleed through or unreality can bleed through into our reality. And like every day we're experiencing liminal zones and paranormal activity that we don't even really register. But once you key into it, once you realize, and honestly, if you're living in the world of 2026 modern day and you're looking at what's happening in the world and with the elites and how they operate, the bottom line is whether you're religious or not, whether you believe in a spiritual dimension of things or not, I do, but I'm also someone who's gone through the full gamut. And it's not like I was like ever a hardcore materialist, like, oh, only science is real or whatever. I've always been skeptical and I've had to learn and realize things my own way. But I've come to the conclusion now at my age, I'm 33 now. I've come to the conclusion there's absolutely a spiritual dimension to everything. And there's dark forces and there's good forces and there's all sorts of things going on beyond the realms of what we see. What we see in reality is a very small spectrum of what's actually going on. And then you can get to the religious conceptions of everything, angels and demons fighting for souls, etc. It's all potentially out there. It's all possible. There's definitely a spiritual dimension to everything. That's kind of my baseline foundation now. So I'll end the Clive Barker rant by just saying that he understands that too. And he likes to have a lot of good fun with it, with his stories, because it's not just like, oh, I like Clive Barker because it's like visceral and he's a good prose artist, and he is. And he's a great filmmaker. Like he directed Hellraiser and Nightbreed. He's just a fantastic mind. He's one of the most imaginative people I've ever encountered their art. And he's someone who's super inspired by William Blake as well, just like I am. And William Blake's whole ethos and William Blake's mind as a representation of it is that the imagination is the greatest force in the world. And the imagination is really like the godlike force. William Blake even goes as far as to say that Jesus came to show us, the light of God is within us, and all of our hearts are sacred. We all have a divine spark, and that imaginal realm is where you fully manifest yourself. And Jesus was saying, Neville Goddard is another person who speaks of this in a religious way, where it's imagination is something that gets us closer to God. And Clive Barker just so happens to take that and use it in a horrifying and occult and very, very visceral stories that at a surface level you engage with them, it's like, oh, this is just like splatterpunk or splatter house stuff, but it's actually very intellectually engaging. And especially if you read his books, you start to realize his real cosmology, and his characters are fighting for the forces of good. They just have to go through hell to get it. So that's all just to say Clive Barker is very important to my process, and Clive Barker is very important to Anthology. So this is a quote by Jean Baudrillard. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The eclipse of God left us up against reality. Where will the eclipse of reality leave us? One of those thinkers, just to reflect on that. But so volume 1, Primordio. Beginnings and endings, gods and myths, the ancient soils whetted by source. This is a John Martin Horror und Delight. It's like kind of a liminal hurricane of flesh, branches, tentacles, angels, demons. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here, but it perfectly represents the kind of, we're entering a different zone of reality, a different zone of how physics and magic operates. And Primordio is volume 1. This is the first 10 stories, and the last one is a novella, which will be very exciting to get through. So the first story is Godblink, and these basically were written in order, right? Especially these first 3, because these first 3 are interconnected, I will say. And these first 3, I pitched it to World of Myth magazine as like, I am writing this anthology. The first 3 stories are interconnected. If you like Godblink, you'll like the other 2 maybe. Would you consider publishing them in multiple issues? And they ended up liking them, and I did get these 3 published in 3 straight issues of World of Myth magazine. So Godblink is based on an actual historical event, which was one of my early short stories, called The Battle of the Eclipse. And you could Google that. It's a real event. Ancient world, 2 armies were battling in a field. A solar eclipse happens. It's like middle of the day, they're doing their battle. solar eclipse happens while they're all there, and everybody has a religious rapture moment where, you know, there's no conception for this. What does this mean? Is the world ending? Is this God? Is this the devil? What is going on? And in the historical event, it's a kind of an affirmation of humanity. The two armies and the generals and the leaders they stopped fighting, and they actually came to an armistice. They came and negotiated in the middle of that battlefield, in the middle of that field where people had already been slain and the battle was on. And they came to an armistice. They came to a peace negotiation, because this is the ultimate sign from God. And it's part of the idea that, so something else I'll say is Primordio. Most of the stories, I think all but one or two of the stories, take place in the ancient world, like medieval or earlier, right? So these stories are also about how ancient is, me getting the intellectual side and the mindscape of ancient people. How did they think of their environment? When an ancient person saw a wolf in the woods, let alone seeing an eclipse in the sky during the day, they registered that moment with extreme religious understanding. And I mean religious in a spiritual sense. I don't mean like religion. I mean, they had a spiritual connection to the land, to the animals, to the sky, to the birds, everything, right? So every single thing was an omen, and it was a good sign, a bad sign. You know, you read Greek mythology, you start to understand this. It's like something is happening around us, or like this relationship is going this way. It's like, oh, this is Hermes energy, or this is Hades intervening, or this is Psyche. You know, there's all these dimensions that the modern man, it's hard to really comprehend for us. Even if you are really religious, it's still really hard to comprehend how an ancient person was thinking. And this is just a rich concept. So the pitch here, I guess I'll finally read. Two armies of the ancient world, the Cilicians and Panoptics, react separately to the midday eclipsing of their battlefield. So this was a relatively short one, 1,500 words. And then the second story here is Behewrit. A soldier wakes up at the bottom of a body pile, his leg gone, his army destroyed. Inside the folds of his ruined armor, he finds a 20-sided charm made of poetry parchment that grants a single wish. And yes, Behewrit, if you know, is a Berserk reference. And then this third story here, Zobe. 4 warriors settle around the campfire after a battle in the hills. They tell stories. One of them recounting the myth of Zobe, a cosmic cryptid who sings songs of lightning and rides the thunder. So Zobe is an important one to me because this character of Luster Zobe is a mythic archetype I've created. Basically, it's like I'm creating my own Greek god, or I'm creating my own like demigod or archetype, or it's like, this also happens to be a D&D character. I have a D&D character based on Luster as well, named Luster. And Zobe has appeared in a few of my stories, and I've commissioned art for Luster Zobe as well from a really fantastic artist, Acatopia, I think. And Zobe is the protagonist of the current novel I'm writing, Luster Zobe is. So this is all to say that this is one of my favorite stories of the collection, and I think it's 3,100. These are kind of progressively increasing in word count. This is the most like complete kind of story in the first 3, and Zobe's a really fun story I create a bard character that helps the reader get into the mindset of the ancient man, and how, when a bard started waxing poetic around the campfire in the ancient world, people locked in, right? Like that. And like the meme thing to say is, that was their Netflix or that was their Instagram, which like, yeah, that's technically true. But it was deeper than that, right? The bard, the storyteller, the jester, these figures were allowing the collective, allowing the campfire, allowing the family, whatever it was, the tribe, to connect with the supernal realms, supernatural realms, the story realms, the imaginal realms. And the bard could pull things out from the ether, because the bard's just singing a song or just talking, they're telling a story or whatever it is, but it was magic, right? And people saw it that way. And this story gets into the idea of like, okay, a bard starts telling a story, it's kind of a spooky story, it's kind of telling about a god that may not be your friend, or a god that may mess with you or play with you in a fundamental way. It's like, what if, as they're telling that story, what if they're actually summoning that figure to appear in that moment? And that's what this story is about. So Panidiot is the 4th story. Moving on. Panidiot is a fun one. A man named Geronimo shadows the god Pan through the forest for a day. It's an idiot plot, which is a plot kept in motion solely by the fact that everybody involved is an idiot. And if the story would quickly end or possibly not even happen if this were not the case. So Panidiot is inspired by, I read some early 20th century writers such as Arthur Machen and Dion Fortune, along with Lord Dunsany. They used Pan, the Greek god of kind of like primordial nature, and Pan means all, and Pan is the root word for panic. So Pan is this like otherworldly, almost like Lovecraftian cosmic horror, cosmic delight god that's really fascinating. And there's been some excellent Pan-based fiction. So I read some of those. I haven't read Dion Fortune's Pan book yet, but I read The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen, and I read this Lord Dunsany poem, and it kind of got me inspired. I did a little bit more research on Pan. And this story is really like a hero's journey. It's a micro hero's journey. It's 4,400 words. So it's a pretty fat short story. And there's 6 parts to it, actually separated out into little micro chapters within a short story. And it's a little, it's a little hero's journey for this man named Geronimo, who he basically sees Pan playing his flute at the edge of the forest with his back turned, and he starts chasing him. And then he gets into the forest. And once he gets into the forest, he's in a realm of thresholds. He's in a realm of danger and delight and imagination. And Pan isn't so much a character in the story as Pan is the story. Pan is the forest itself, and he has to go through these trials and tribulations. And it's a funny story. There's a sexual dimension to the story as well, and it's an ancient world story. And the character, he's naked the whole story. So imagine a naked man running through the woods chasing Pan. That's the impetus and the exciting incident in this story, and it's a lot of fun. Panidiot's one of my favorites. It was one of the ones I really wanted to get published. I submitted it a few places. And I was like, searching for magazines that were into, kind of nature, primordial based horror, or like, this is kind of like a dark fantasy story. A lot of these stories end up being like dark fantasy as much as horror. But, there's horrifying aspects in every one of these stories. Shibboleth Egregore is story 5. So this is another short one. This is one of the more conceptual stories in the sense that I don't really have characters in the story so much as this is like a report on these two entities, almost like in the voice of like Mulder, or a really articulate researcher or intellectual or student or scholar on, in this example, extra-dimensional entities or supernatural creatures or cryptids, right? Or kaiju. Like, kaiju is probably a better word for what these two creatures are than cryptids. I do have a cryptid story later. Shibboleth Egregore, 2 titanic and mysterious creatures born of the Imaginatrix do dialectical battle over the psychosphere of humanity. I mean, and this pitch itself is already telling you, like, this story, this conceptual story is like a language buffet. I call it a language feast in the sense that I pull out all the stops on my understanding of philosophy, sociology, and psychology. The idea with this story is Shibboleth and Egregore. If you Google those words, they are words that have a meaning. Shibboleth is like a cultural manifestation of, that's the way things are done. That's a shibboleth. And it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. It's also used in like computer environments. Like I remember first encountering the word shibboleth in like elementary school for whatever reason. Whatever like the system or internet system that we had, if you like clicked to like an error page or you like got an error page or the internet disconnected or something, you'd go to that page. It's like an error 404 type thing that people know. But in the school system, it would say like shibboleth, not, responding, or like shibboleth. It said shibboleth and it was like in the URL. And I remember seeing that word and being like, what is that? It's such an otherworldly word. And then reading like Lovecraft and like learning about Cthulhu and like these Lovecraftian elder gods and stuff. Shibboleth kind of slots into that. So my conception of the shibboleth is basically it's like a leviathan at the base of the Mariana Trench that no one knows about, that's using its psychic powers. Aboleth from D&D is another, I'm kind of conjoining that idea here. Aboleth, if you play D&D, are like they're like whales or krakens or like leviathans that have insane psychic power, and they are very difficult to fight, and they're aquatic, so they're underwater. And then egregores are, if you Google that, egregore is something where like collective belief, like a lot of people thinking of the same thing and trying to produce the same idea. You could say, like, religions to some degree produce egregores in the world. Egregore being like, the symbol of a figure that's important in a divine way to a religious group, or like just any group of people. And the occult figures, and they may produce egregores in a negative way, or may produce an egregore that hunts. So egregores are kind of creepy, and like if you Google it, it's a very interesting read. So I did a lot of reading all this, and then I pit these two creatures against each other, like Rodan versus Godzilla, or like Destroya versus Godzilla. Although they're both it's more like Destroya versus Gigan. They're both kind of evil. Neither of them are Godzilla. As Godzilla's a hero, ultimately. So the sixth story is the Ballad of Grimjest. And this is another hero's journey. It's a dark hero's journey. It's a full story. It's a character study. It's pretty long, 4,400. One of my favorite stories in the collection. This is a original character I created, and another character that I've used across fiction. This story, I won't spoil it, but it has some connection to the other stories in this collection too. The Ballad of Grimjest is: meet Grimjest, traveling jester, highwayman, and part-time serial killer. He is putting on a show for you. This story is about a jester that, you don't want to heckle. You don't want to heckle jesters. I'll just say that. And I do feature a song. I create a parody of one of my favorite songs in this, a rather long song. And that's I basically took the song's lyrics and rewrote them all to fit Grimjest in there, but while keeping the rhymes and the structure and kind of the overall feel and rhythm of the song, of the story. So that's a fun one. I get to write a song in here. And then Angælien is story number 7. An alienated corporate superstar has a surreal encounter with a being from well beyond our reality. So this is the first story in this first section that is modern day, and it's actually in the future. And it kind of seems like it's the far future. I don't fully explain what year it is, but it's a dystopian reality where, it looks like the Matrix. It looks like cyberpunk style world. And this story actually has a connection to Cyber Serial, my cyberpunk novel that I wrote. It was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek Easter egg thing, but then as I was revising it recently, I was like, yeah, Angælien is a prequel. This short story is a prequel to Cyber Serial. It depicts a world that's like 100 years before the events of Cyber Serial, which is like the year 2200. So you could say this is the year 2100, which also happens to be the word count. But yeah, Angælien is a weird one. It's hard to explain really, but it's really a reflection and a meditation on my own time in the corporate environment, and the idea of encountering a supernatural entity or having a liminal, supernal, moment or encounter at the office, in a corporate environment. That's very actually intriguing and interesting to me. And there's actually, it's kind of, I guess it's subconscious. I didn't really think of this consciously while I was writing, but it's kind of subconsciously inspired by the Matrix too. Because you think about one of the most intense moments in the beginning of the Matrix is Neo trying to find his way out of the corporate cubicle maze while the agents are searching for him. And that has kind of the same vibe where it's like, what if there was weird stuff happening in a corporate environment where it's usually just mundane and everybody's sitting at their station and kind of doing the Excel monkey hit the button thing. Because I've been there and I know what it's like and I know the mindset. So this character has a surreal encounter, and I get to have a really otherworldly alien title on it too, where I combine the AE, which I really like doing. And you'll kind of notice with some of the titles of these, Panidiot, Angælien, Godblink, I'm doing this thing where I combine words and kind of create a new word to come up with some of these titles, which is fun. So story 8 is called Gowls, or Jails. Gowls is from Elden Ring, Ever Gowls. They're like little boss encounter sub-bosses you can go to. Yes, 2,300 words. This is another conceptual story, but it's like 5 micro stories within one short story. So this is exploring the concept of imprisonment through the experiences of 5 different gowls or jails in different historical and cultural settings. So this one moves backward in time, actually, where the first jail is in 1960s Cuba, like Panopticon, and there's the U.S. was backing revolutions and things were happening. The Panopticon was a jail concept I don't think it was developed in Cuba, but Jeremy Bentham, you read about Panopticon. One of my favorite albums is called Panopticon, so that's why I know about this concept. And yeah, each story, so it goes back in time. 1960s Cuba, Panopticon. Psychologically, what does it mean? The Panopticon, if you're not familiar, it's a jail design architecture concept where you put the guards tower and the viewers and observers and controllers of the jail in a tower in the middle of a radial like circle, where you put the jail cells and the people that are being kept there on the circle, so the watchtower is able to watch everyone at once, and there's never a time where the prisoners aren't being watched. So psychologically, that has a lot of effects, and the Panopticon is a great, unfortunately, is actually a great metaphor for what's happening with the digital surveillance state in the modern world today, where with technology, where everything's embedded, we're constantly being observed. Every corner has little micro cameras. If you ever look into any of that, it's like, it's crazy. We're getting filmed everywhere we go, no matter what, if you live in any city, big city. So knowing that has an impact on your psychology. And it's not just like, oh, if you know you're being watched, you'll be on your best behavior. It's like, if you know you're being watched, it does all sorts of things to you. So that's partly what the story is about. Then I go backward in time further, 1940s Japan, bioexperiments. I go to the 1800s, Old West. There's a sheriff jailing a guy. And the concept of, Old West justice was a little bit different. And then I go to a labyrinth in Morocco, where there's a Magi's assistant that has woken up in a labyrinth, and he thinks he's being tested by his master. But yeah, he's starting to realize that it may be a little bit darker than that. And then the last one is a medieval torture dungeon where a prisoner is being tortured because the king and his lead scientist, the torturer, are realizing this guy's immortal and we can do whatever we want to him and he'll survive. His flesh will grow back. These things will happen. So this is a fun story that you kind of see the through lines of my own like commentary and like critiques of like what we do to each other as humans and like what jails mean. This was an idea that kind of came out of nowhere. I don't really know how I came up with this, but it's just like a fun, and it's not that long either. So it's like I get in and get out. It's like 5 microfiction stories in one short story. So story 9, Bread King. So Bread King's another longer one, 4,500. It's about 4 8th grade boys who break into a Bread King factory to expose what they believe is a harmful ingredient called sand, quote unquote, used in the bread. So this one's really fun. This is one of my favorite stories. So this is 8th grade boys. This is modern day too. So Bread King is modern day. Angælien is in the future. All the rest of these are ancient world or medieval or like older. So Bread King is actually, I created this entire concept because I saw this ad. I don't remember where I saw this. I honestly could not tell you where I saw this. But is this like a real brand? I hope Bread King doesn't sue me. That would be funny. A healthy approach to end your hunger. Golden wheat atta bread. So there's a lot of reasons why this is kind of like really, really creepy to me. And also like kind of esoteric, like atta. But yeah, I saw this ad and I was kind of like, what if I did like a bread-based horror story? And this, out of all of these, like pretty much all these, I had the title, I had the idea. I was like, oh, I know how the story's going to go. Panidiot. Okay, there's going to be animals. There's going to be beasts. There's going to be Bacchanalia, Zobe, kind of a creepy, like cryptid figure, Godblink, Behewrit. As I was kind of coming up with these, I kind of knew Ballad of Grimjest. I was like, yeah, I know exactly how to write this. I know exactly what this story is going to entail. I could already see it. Bread King was one where I came up with this idea. And I just, the pitch was just like, what, like the bread king is waiting for you. And like the Bread King, like I didn't even know what I was going to do. And this was one of the ones where I considered cutting it because I didn't have an idea. I went for a long time without having an idea for what this was. So I was just like, whatever, I'll cross it when I get to it. And the concept is, this kind of plays on conspiracy theories and the idea that this one's like pretty believable, honestly. 4 8th grade boys break into a Bread King factory because they think, if you look into conspiracy theories, like the United States especially, there's all sorts of, it's not even conspiracy theories. This stuff's been confirmed now. So that's why it's like conspiracy theories isn't even really a good way to describe it. But there's all sorts of stuff in US food and in the water supply that other countries, like namely in Europe, which is like our peer area, our peer nation, as far as like we know how European laws work better than others, I guess. It's like Europeans don't let their food producers put certain things in the food because it's toxic, or there's proven negative effects that we have in our food here. So when you go to McDonald's in America versus you go to McDonald's somewhere else, I'm just talking about the lowest of the food chain, honestly. Yeah, there's a reason why McDonald's in other countries, people say like, wow, this is like a decent experience. Whereas McDonald's in America is like, it's literally like hell on earth. And the ingredients in the food taste that way too, is because they're literally putting the worst, and like, you don't even want to know. But the idea is that our food supply is kind of messed up. And these 4 8th grade boys are going to do something about it. You can't fault them for that. But what they find inside the factory, it's not exactly good. And are they able to escape the bread factory? You'll have to read it to find out. But this is a lot of fun. This is actually one of the scarier stories. And this is me trying to tap into Stephen King and like the Stand By Me. The Body is the story, and then Stand By Me is the movie. Kids on Bikes, Stranger Things style, where it's like kids trying to go solve a mystery on their own and they get into trouble. Yeah, this story is really creepy by the end, and I'm really proud of it because it was such like a weird, out of left field idea that I didn't know what I was doing with. And then by the time I was done with it, I was like, yeah, this is a good story. This is also a story I think Clive Barker would be proud of. So take that how you will. And then we get to the centerpiece, the big red burst on the screen. If you know this image, then you're my friend. Psireskin. Psireskin's the novella in this collection. It takes a hefty 23,000 words, which is like 80 to 100 pages about. It has 8 chapters, so it's like a little like half novel, third of a novel length story that's pretty meaty. And this takes place in modern day too. So this is modern day. An Interpol agent and captured international art thief cross into the English countryside after an accident on the way to the airport. Meanwhile, a ritual has commenced in the town of Sire, summoning demons and perhaps the end times. Suddenly, hard-boiled detective Ginn and magnificent bastard Solomon Goodfellow must work together to survive the night. This story is inspired by Bloodborne, and there's actually a lot of lore around the story, so I'll try to concisely explain this. But so Psireskin, Sire is this, similar to Luster Zobe, is a god that I've created for use originally in a D&D campaign that I was DMing years ago. And it was one of the gods I created to kind of like catalyze the story and produce the party specifically encountered an aboleth that wasn't trying to kill them, wasn't necessarily evil, and started psychically talking to them and connecting them and told them the story of like Sire, because Sire was the deity that had gifted the aboleth and all aboleths psychic energy. So Sire is the god of creation, and that means art, it means architecture, and it means like motherhood and like birth and like the generations being like created year after age, etc. So Sire has 2 children, one Sanguis and the other Sisig. And Sanguis is the all-mother and kind of the progenitor of the vampires, blood power. And Sisig is the male. Sanguis is a female. Sisig is her brother. And Sanguis predates Sisig. It's kind of like a reverse Adam and Eve, where Adam was the first man, and God took a rib out of Adam to create Eve. This is like reversed, where Sanguis is the first, and then Sanguis realized they needed a masculine entity to dialectically challenge and evolve themselves. So Sanguis created Sisig, but Sisig is still like a brother, and Sisig is technically the son of Sire. So Sisig is the first psionic. So again, I was making this for D&D, so I was thinking of, I'm going to create new vampire lore. Like basically, I'm going to create a super vampire idea, Sanguis. Like if you're a vampire, you're in the lineage of Sanguis, but if you're a Sanguis vampire, then you're like a super vampire. And then Sisig is the same thing, where it's like a psionic, which psionic's like psychic energy, telepathy, telekinesis. The psionics are really strong. Psionics are crazy, like overpowered really in D&D, because their magic doesn't operate the same way as arcane or clerical or all the other magic systems. So Sanguis and Sisig are the all-mother and the old father over vampirism and psionic powers. So Psireskin takes this idea and it creates like a Bloodborne scenario, where it's like Bloodborne is taking place in like I guess like 1800s or whatever, but this is modern day. And it's like these 2 characters, like co-op Bloodborne. These 2 characters, Interpol agent, international art thief, they are enemies. They've the idea, the backstory of them is the Interpol agent has been chasing this not yet captured, this art thief across the world for years as he's stealing like the Mona Lisa, doing these crazy art heists. It's very like pulpy, and like this is like a story that I think I'm trying to tap into, like weird tales, like Conan, Solomon Kane type energy. As these heroes are kind of like larger than life and like a hardboiled detective and like kind of a wisecracking art thief, but they each have their own individual arcs. And the idea is the Interpol agent has been chasing this guy for a year. He's finally captured him. We start this scene where they're driving to the airport through the English countryside. It's a foggy night, and Interpol agents driving the car. There's there's glass. There's like chain between the front seat and the back seat because this is an Interpol car. It's capturing somebody in it. It's like a cop car, but in plain clothes or whatever. And the art thief is kind of like, whinging and complaining that he got captured, but he's also like saying all this psychological warfare stuff. The Interpol agent, because they know each other really well. The Interpol agents had to like profile this guy for years, so he knows him front and back. And the art thief is a little bit wiser, and he's done his own research on the Interpol agent and knows about his family. So he's saying all these things that are upsetting the Interpol agent. Interpol agent's getting pissed. They end up crashing the car. I won't explain everything in the circumstances to not spoil it, but they're like, crap. They're like stuck in the middle of nowhere, right? Phone's not working. So it's classic horse and arrow, and they're like, okay, we got to find shelter. It's a cold night. So they find this town, and as they like walk up to the town and overlook it on the hill, they see that the town is currently undergoing a ritual. There's all these people in cloaks. There's fire. There's something happening. And this ritual commences, things start happening, and they have to go to a human moment. The art thief is handcuffed, and he's being like escorted around by the agent. He's like, you're coming with me. There's no way I'm letting you out of my sight. We're going to find some place to stay. I'm going to call somebody in the morning, and we're going to go to the airport, and I'm going to take you back. You're going to serve out your sentence. You're going to get 25 years or whatever in America. So they're in England. I guess I don't know if I mentioned that, but which is where Bloodborne is. So Psireskin is this really fun story as they have to have a human-to-human moment where they got to start working together to survive as monsters start coming out of the town. Diablo 1 is another, that's what this image is in the background here, is another inspiration. The stairwell is like, it's a stairwell down into the unconscious abyss, and like looks like it's underwater. Psireskin's a lot of fun, and the last bit of lore I'll say on Psireskin is, this is also a story that's connected to Cyber Serial, strangely enough. So the beginning and inciting incident of Cyber Serial is the protagonist and some of her online friends all they're making a collective, kind of pact or a fun creative project together where they're going to spend the summer all making something. The main character, Gabriel, is writing a novel, and that's kind of the inciting incident, the whole situation that happens in Cyber Serial. And then her friends are, one of them's writing an anime, another one's writing a screenplay for a movie, and then another one is writing a video game idea, and that video game idea is called Psireskin. And it's this exact concept. So when I was writing Cyber Serial, I came up with that, and then I was like, this is a really cool idea that I want to write this story. This is just like it's a very small element of the story where it's just one of her friends decides to like make a video game that's this concept. And then I was like, I'm gonna write this for Anthology. So that's a fun example of how one of your works of art can immediately inspire and influence another one. And I ended up, writing that concept down for Psireskin while drafting Cyber Serial, and then a few months later, I was writing this. So that's pretty fun. And this is like a really, really satisfying story. I honestly thought about selling this maybe as its own thing, but it's really just fun. It's like the centerpiece and the main story within Anthology. It's by far the longest. Arguably the most satisfying and like kind of the deepest character work. I also say that another inspiration, I just went and rewatched this movie on Friday in theaters because sometimes I scan Alamo. Alamo Drafthouse plays old movies all the time. And I was scanning it and I saw they were playing Face Off. 1997, Nick Cage, John Travolta, John Woo's Face Off. On Friday, I went and saw it in theaters for the first time. And oh my God, that's literally one of my favorite movies. It's so insane. And like, I'll stand by and defend and challenge anyone to dissuade me from believing it is one of the best movies ever made. Like, definitely action movies, but just in general, how ridiculous that movie is, how it just works. John Woo is obsessed with pathos, and like, he really understands, okay, this is a gonzo action movie that's like, it's like a Stallone or Schwarzenegger style. blowout of like crazy action. But Travolta and Cage and their performances in that movie, it's incredible. So the reason I bring that up is the dynamic between the main agent hero Travolta and the evil terrorist sniper villain Cage in that movie, and they have to switch faces, and that's the whole bit. But their dynamic in that movie is really, really fun. And when I was writing the first chapter of this, I was thinking of Face Off and how to like kind of, it's kind of like hammed up where it's like, okay, this agent has been profiling this guy for a long time and kind of admires him for how he's been able to get away with all these things. And he's just like an effective person, but he also, I have to capture him. This is my mission. This is my holy mission in this life. And the Interpol agent in this story, just like Wu's characters often is Christian. He's a Catholic. He like believes in like holy power and holy duty, and it ends up helping him in this situation as they start fighting demons. And the art thief is kind of like a Renaissance man, womanizer, and he has his own arc and he has his own experience because they have to work together, and these two enemies have to become friends in a temporary crisis situation. So it's a really fun, meaty, satisfying experience. I hope people enjoy. That's Psireskin. Here's some quotes. I can read these. This is like just excerpts that I kind of put from various stories, some long, some short, to kind of give an idea of my prose style and my linguistic choices and effectiveness. So this first one's from Godblink. Men died savagely and constantly. The grass was starting to grow on blood. Then Manny felt the exquisite pain of regrowth. Fresh flesh crawled out from the frayed ending, long bones wrenching back into place. Behewrit. Zobe is said to shadow these beings, jesters and murderers, sometimes illuminating their minds, other times possessing their bodies. Zobe's words landing in the right ear can lead to laughter or slaughter. Zobe is not a wolf in sheep's clothing. Zobe is a wolf with the demeanor of an otter, the shape of a jaguar, and the heart of a ram. Zobe is a killer of minds and a flayer of flesh, but only the best of either. Shibboleth, the Shibboleth and Egregore are, in fact, like everything else, contributing to the state of alchemy. Time and space collide and produce the action swirling about the cosmic cores. The Leths and Gores coincide and summon the angels and demons born of mortals, set to endlessly battle and evolve their co-counterpart. Together they build out schemes, blueprints, and shower thoughts. It is deep inside of the imagination of mankind where these two make their arena. There are universes within the mind of even a single man, so one can begin to understand their sheer power in terms of navigational capabilities. Do you take seriously what the gods made for fun? Panidiot. Sido is for slicing, but vicious is for gutting. The Ballad of Grimjest. This is not the first time that my cock has betrayed me. Psireskin, that's old Solomon. The sudden intrusion of a dull, hardened reality had ended his furious flight of fancy, all the glee and anima now draining from a broken form. Angælien. Boys, let's unleash hell. Bread King. So now we get into Volume 2, Mundamania, modernized tales of brutal malevolence and inspired occult chicanery, inside classrooms and convention centers and catacombs and ill-fated connections, either mundane or inhumane. So I'm at 53 minutes now, so it's pretty good. It's like an hour, I guess, for each. It won't be another hour to get through Mundamania, but just checking the clock. All right, so Mundamania is, these stories are more modern day. So this is where it's more like, Stephen King and Barker, masters of this, where they have ancient ghost story stuff too, but a lot of their stories are modern day. So it's like supernatural entities and fantastical creatures entering into the reality that we inhabit and upsetting everything. It's a lot of fun. So most of these stories are in modern day. There's a few that are not. So The Mundane Egg, William Blake. So William Blake's one of my favorite artists, hugely inspirational, and he has this idea, the mundane shell, the mundane egg, where and it's kind of what I was getting into earlier. The reality we inhabit is actually a very small slice of the spectrum. And you can literally see that on like the UV spectrum, like literally what we can see visibly in the reality of like light reflecting off things, and the color spectrum is a fraction of what's actually going on in terms of like, cosmic rays and UV radiation. All these different things are going on that we have no visible connection to. We only know about through like complex scientific procedure. So we're in this mundane egg that we think is mundane, but we're surrounded and interceded by all these crazy forces. And like this is William Blake's cosmology: Luva, Urizen, Thumos, Earthen. And it's pretty hard to understand. He like basically created his own like cosmological religious. He was a Christian, but he had this imaginative realm that he worked in, and very fascinating. But William Blake's a huge inspiration to me in many ways. So yeah, let's get into the next one. So this is story number 11 on the full count, and the first story of Mundamania. I really kick off with something that's going to punch you in the mouth: Operation Terror Eviction. This is it's really red. I actually I coded these to be more or less highlighted red based on how bloody and visceral and gory the story is. So How to Be a Gnome Practical Guide. This one's a little bit of a change of pace. It's the shortest story by far, and it's literally like a small bulleted list of how to be a gnome, which is me having fun. It's tongue-in-cheek. There's some creepy aspects to it for sure, because gnomes are actually very strange and ethereal creatures if you look into their lore. But Operation Terror Eviction, on the other hand, is the opposite, and this is 4,500 words. It's pretty long. I have 4 like kind of fully realized characters that I get to explore. 4-man SWAT team delves the catacombs underneath Washington, D.C. in search of a terrorist encampments. They encounter something demonic lurking in the dark. So this is a pretty simple setup, and I get to have a lot of fun with it. And this one has a subtly, I say it's modern day, but it's actually a little bit near future, where the idea is, well, first of all, there's catacombs under Washington, D.C., so that's just me having a little fun. And then the idea is that homeless people have become labeled as terrorists, quote unquote, so the state can just like start wiping them out. So it's like a dystopian kind of like hell on earth America situation. And this SWAT team starts the story dancing at a club, and they're all kind of like it's 2 couples. So it's man, woman, man, woman, 2 men, 2 women, and they're all like dating, and they're not like married, but they have fun, at home and on the job as a unit. And they're at the nightclub, and then they get a call that like, hey, there's been a gun shipment. The terrorists are amassing in this area, and we need to go check it out. So then they end up having to go into the catacombs, and what they encounter in there, it's pretty gnarly. So yeah, you'll have to read the story to find out if the SWAT team's able to evict the terror that they find down there. And then How to Be a Gnome and Practical Guide. This is actually inspired by this 4chan post, How Do I Become a Gnome? And there's this YouTube video that I recommend everyone go watch right now called 5 Scary Gnomes Caught on Camera. And, this is just one of the all-time videos on YouTube. I watch it every morning, of course. And gnomes are out there. And this gets a little bit of lore into them. A cheerful, suspiciously detailed instructional guide on the curious nature of gnomes and the 20 steps required to become one. Decrees included, results not guaranteed. If you want to become a gnome, I suggest reading the story. If you want to understand gnomes a little bit further, if you want to learn how to respect gnomes and what they're here for, I would recommend reading the story. Shiva Kali. So this is another one that is inspired by an actual 4chan post here. A caring boyfriend tries to help his anxious girlfriend by imagining himself as Shiva slaying her mental demons. So I'm not a 4chan user. 4chan is a cesspool, but there's a lot of content that gets around. I probably found this on Twitter. I don't actually remember, but this is something I threw in the mood board. I was like, that's an idea for a story. That is a great idea. So and again, like 4chan, like Reddit, I would say 80% of the time these stories are completely made up, and it's just fiction. It's just like them lying, having a good time. That's fine. It's still useful for my purposes as a writer, but I take everything with a grain of salt that you see on Reddit and 4chan. Frequently people lying all the time on those sites. But here's a fun one. I like green text. Wife gets psychotic episode, hears voices. She's diagnosed schizoaffected, placed on Invega and Haldol, which I don't know what those are, but they sound hellish. A voice is still there. Be me, autism extraordinaire, obsessively fantasize about pole-tier industrial scale extermination for almost every waking hour of the day since my early teens. Wow, what a rich inner life. Start imagining the voices in her head as physical things I can torture instead. A few days later, wife is angry at me, tells me the voices are screaming because I, quote, won't stop dismembering and cannibalizing them over and over. All right, I'm 100% a believer. What the F is going on? And there's actually another one here too that's a little bit longer. Same thing. The entities behind schizophrenia. There's a Jung quote about psychological point of view. Demons are nothing other than intruders from the unconscious. Complexes are comparable to demons, which fitfully harass our thoughts and actions. And since antiquity, in the Middle Ages, acute neurotic disturbances were conceived of as possession. The psychotic drowns in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight. Joseph Campbell. That's also a Nick Cage. Nick Cage says that in Mandy. His character says it. Just a great quote. The psychotic drowns in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight. Which that is a perfect way to describe, at least from my understanding. And like Shiva and Kali, if you're not familiar, Shiva is one of the main gods in Hindu mythology. And Shiva is the kind of like a Jesus or Hercules figure that is a creator and a destroyer, is a figure that slays demons, is a figure that is venerated, but is also very harsh and like is like a fighter. And Kali is the feminine version of that in many ways, where Kali is kind of like the dread aspect of the feminine energy. Like when the feminine energy becomes a destroyer, like the world or like this area needs to be cleansed by a destructive kind of monstrous figure. If you look up art of Shiva and Kali, you get to see kind of their energy and archetype and what they are. And I don't know a lot about Hindu mythology, but I researched it for this, and like Shiva is someone I was familiar with, but that's exactly what Shiva is. He's the psychotic drowns in the same waters the mystic swims with delight. Shiva swims with delight through the rivers of hell, essentially, metaphorically, but also kind of literally. And this is a fun story where taking that idea of these like demonic entities being something that they influence us and affect us by psychically connecting with us and psychically manipulating us, and like, voices in your head, like, again, do your own research and like figure out your own kind of mind state for this. But what I'm actually saying here is that I'm saying this isn't just a story. You should engage with this at several levels of your imagination and think of ways of how you and your thoughts in your head work. And everyone struggles with like kind of random depressing, angry, all the negative emotions, that also have their own positive sides, of course, that you kind of inexplicably get these thoughts. You're like, why am I thinking of that? Why did that happen? Or like, what is that? Where did that come from? There is like, some evidence and some degree of reasonable reason to believe that consciousness is non-local. We're receiving a signal from somewhere and we're like channeling things versus, consciousness can't be found in the brain scientifically. There's nowhere a scientist, a brain surgeon can be like, point to something, a lobe, and say consciousness is there. The lobes are the different areas, almost like a computer, like processor, GPU, motherboard. We can kind of point to like the mechanical, how signals are sent, how the neurons work. But there's still so much about the brain and consciousness that we can't even comprehend. And that's why it leads a lot of, and again, the mystics said this 2,000 years ago. So the mystics were already on this. Where it's like, I'm receiving my consciousness from God. I'm channeling everything through nous. Like, you can research all this stuff. But the idea is, okay, if harmful entities interact and influence us and manipulate us through our thoughts, why wouldn't we be able to fight back, right? And that's what this story is about. And it's kind of like a joke story on the 4chan thing. But I take this seriously and at face value, in the sense that this story starts with the girlfriend kind of locking herself in the bathroom, and she's having like a kind of an episode. She's crying. She's upset. She's not accepting anything right now as far as like help from anybody. And her boyfriend's there, and he's on the other side of the door, kind of, knocking on the door. He's not slamming on it. He's not angry. He's trying to help her. She's not hiding from him. She's just struggling with something. She's like, and the story gets into it, but he's like, let me help you. Like, just tell me what's wrong. It's like, this is the voices again. It's kind of like she's had these problems before. And she's like, no, they're right. I'm worthless and everything. And he's like, no, tell me who they are. What are these voices saying? I'm going to help you. And then he starts to envision himself as Shiva. And then the story goes into the imaginal, fantastic realms from there. It's a lot of fun. This is also a very violent and very bloody story, because it's also about active imagination. If you look into William Blake, if you look into Carl Jung, active imagination is basically what every writer is doing when you write fiction. You're actively imagining yourself as that person in this moment. You're actively imagining yourself as that villain or as that monster. You have to, take all perspectives when you're writing stories. So this story is also about me exercising an active imagination and like, what if I was Shiva or Kali and I was just in hell ripping demons apart? Because it's also a great way to train this imaginal capacity within yourself is to play video games like Doom or Dark Souls or any number of games, really. Dante's Inferno, where you imagine yourself as a hero in hell ripping demons apart, rip and tear. And it's like, that can be a really satisfying, cathartic experience. And that's what this story is about. This story has a very happy ending too, I will say. So Shiva Kali, one of the fun ones, a little bit of a extended pitch there, but I really find this concept interesting. And this is an example of like, if somebody asks me how I get my ideas, I get my ideas from everything, everywhere. And it's always like random stuff. That Bread King image earlier was another example of that. So Benji and Huck, this is kind of another low-key, this is a much more low-key story than Shiva Kali, but Benji Huck is another one. Speak of how I get my ideas. I saw this meme and I was like, that would be a funny story to write. So then it became part of Anthology. So 2 bad kids in class watching the teacher have a mental breakdown because of that. And if you're not initiated into Bleach, this is Aizen, Sosuke Aizen and Gin, who are 2 of the main villains in Bleach. And they are absolutely some of the most psychotic, manipulative characters I've ever seen. And yeah, it's like, this meme is great because if you do watch anime, imagining these 2 people as students in your class when you're trying to teach a class and they're messing with you would be horrifying. It would be a psychological nightmare, right? So this is 2 class clowns so mesmerizing terror upon their English teacher, while sublime reaping forces come down to will these wayward souls back toward their education. So Benji and Huck is like, so this is like my own reflections and meditations on class clownery. And I'm someone who was a class clown, and that was the primary way that I made my way in school and, connected with people. But there's a code, and it's like Neil Macaulay Heat. That's the discipline. There is a discipline with class clowning. You can go too far. You can become a dark jester as much as you can be like a bubbly, delightful force in the classroom for everyone. My class clown lines were on, you have to make the teacher laugh too. You have to provide commentary and class clownery that actually amplifies the education and the class itself. So that's how I, quote unquote, got away with it, in the sense that, yes, I was a class clown. I was frequently disruptive, but I was disruptive in service of the collective project of what the classroom was. And there were some teachers I was an enemy towards, and it became mutual. But for the most part, usually I was getting the teacher on my side too. So like the class clowning was also like benefiting the teacher. I could do a whole class on ethical class clownery, honestly. But Benji and Huck is these 2 class clowns take the dark side, and they're disrupting. They're being disruptive in a very negative way. And they're protected because they're teachers on the PTO, and the teacher's afraid of the principal. The principal likes them. The idea here is like a Twilight Zone situation where the teacher is kind of the only one that knows that they're as diabolical as they are. And they cross lines, cross boundaries. They're like basically sexually harassing the teacher too. She's like a young lady. So I really set these guys up to be like, you really start to hate them. And then by the end of the story, and this one doesn't have like this is one of the more lighter stories. There's nothing too insane. There's no violence in the story other than verbal violence. But these figures appear, and it's kind of like a folk tale, mythological. It's like, if you challenge the teacher, if you challenge someone in their sacred environment, in their sanctuary, there may be forces that come to their aid that may overwhelm you. So that's what this story is about. And this story is actually also directly inspired by a Night Gallery episode that also takes place in a classroom, where it's the teacher teaching the kids. I think it's college class in the Night Gallery episode. And if you've watched Night Gallery, you know what I'm talking about. I don't remember the episode's name, but it's a teacher teaching the kids about the elder gods from Lovecraft. And as he's teaching and like kind of saying these chants and stuff, he starts to summon some of those figures into the classroom. Really fun episode, really, really funny, actually. It's like a tongue-in-cheek. And that's definitely partly what inspired this story. So Heen is another one that got published in Dandelion Revolution Press. Um, so this was a story that I was writing. It was originally going to be a male protagonist, but then as I was kind of searching Scribble and was like compiling my list of this story will go good with this publication, this one will go here, etc. I had like a big Excel spreadsheet. Um, this one I saw Dandelion Revolution Press was accepting submissions for. This is winter 2024, so this came out in like January 2025. I submitted it in like fall of 24. This publication, Dandelion Revolution Press, was requesting women's stories. So they wanted like dealing with women's themes, dealing with feminine energy. So then as I was writing this, uh, and their publication theme for that time, that issue was cocoon. So that was the key word where I was like, Heen is my cocoon story. That's what this story is. So then I changed the protagonist to be a female, to be an e-girl, and actually improved the story, and I found the voice immediately. So this is a really fun story. It's the only one written in first person, because this story is you're reading the recovered journal of this live streamer. So the pitch is a giddy ghost hunter and a live streamer rinse the tomb of her great grandfather, pillar of the community and rumored necromancer. She plans to live there for 10 days and commune with his spirit before a live audience. So the idea here is this is about live streaming culture. This is about how the younger generation, Zoomers, millennials, we've adopted this streaming culture, which is like, it started with gaming tournaments and streaming, like really Ninja, I think, was one of the pioneers of gaming streaming, where it's like just like a cracked, really good game player going and starting a stream and people watching him like dominate online PvP games. And then now it's expanding with there's like e-girls, there's like hot tub streams, there's all this, whatever you think of it, it's popular. People watch this stuff. But there's also really entertaining streams. There's like political commentary. There's, not that that's entertaining, but there's a lot of people that have like actually a lot of clout politically from both ends of the spectrum, right and left. There's all these really popular streamers. And then this example is a ghost hunter. So like a ghost hunter, there's all these ghost hunting shows, and now there's ghost hunter live streamers. So this is like a veteran ghost hunter and live streamer that goes down into the tomb. It's like a mausoleum. So it's not just like a normal grave. It's like a structure in the middle of this New England cemetery. And she goes down in there to live stream her communing with the spirit. So I have like basically 10 journal entries of her 10 days in the mausoleum. And you get to see the descent and the kind of the occult effects starting to rise up and get more intense. 3,600 words. It's a pretty decently long story. I have a lot of, there's 10 different entries. This one's really fun. It's in the tradition of Lovecraft's, statement of Randolph Carter. Some of the tomb stories where it's like you're reading like a dispatch of somebody going in to like visit a tomb and kind of seeing the descent and the degradation and the dark fate that awaits them. This is a really fun story, and yeah, it's one of the ones that's like the more lighthearted and more comical while still having that dark edge to it. So this is our Accursed Arsenal. This is story number 16. Another long one. This is like a full character study into a master and apprentice. So a master and his apprentice toward the Hall of Sorcerers. The master enumerates his most precious tools and artifacts, elaborating on their bloody powers and origins, soon confronting his apprentice with a rather diabolical reality. So this one is another variation on a previous story I wrote called Crux, which you can read in Supernal Stories Volume 1. It's one of my strongest stories from Thresholds, which is my old blog. Well, my current blog. I'm just not as active on it anymore. Crux is a lot of fun, where it's the same concept, where it's a master and apprentice having a conversation, and as they're having a conversation, it's kind of like a lighthearted, it's more of a chat than it is like a lesson. But as you hear more of the conversation, as it escalates, you start to realize this is a lesson and this is a very serious conversation. And it's actually the end of the story of Crux is like, it starts a new journey in their relationship. This is the same thing, but, a variation on it, where the master at the beginning of the story is like, I don't have a lot of years left in me. I think I have to retire soon. My body is upkept by countless enchantments. I don't tell you how old the master is, but he's old. And the apprentice is kind of like crestfallen at this, where he's like, no, I still need more time with you. He's only like 21, 22. It's like, I need more time to become a magi. I need more time to become as strong as you. And it's kind of like modern day wizards, Harry Potter style wizards, where it's like modern day wizards. They have wands, they have magic words, they have hand signs, seals, they have magic artifacts too. That's what the story is partly about. As what makes a master isn't just like their knowledge and their spellcraft, it's also the artifacts that they imbue themselves with and they utilize to fight other magi or to, prepare and do their work as magic users. I call them sorcerers, but magi, sorcerer, wizard, I'm kind of interchanging and using all those as the same thing. This story is a lot of fun. It's a really good ending. I don't know what else to say about it without spoiling it, but there's also a really fun part in the middle of this story where I get to talk about dinosaurs, because whenever they're touring the Hall of Sorcerers, part of what's in the curriculum of this giant temple, the Temple of Tiamat, is there's a museum of dinosaur bones, and it's like one of the biggest collections of dinosaur bones that these magi, these sorcerers have taken and put into their like segregated temple for no one else to see, and it's like their private collection. So there's a bunch of dinosaurs, and the apprentice is like a huge dinosaur kid, and he's like really excited. It's a parallel metaphor for what comes later in the story. Dinosaur bones, and do they still have energy in them? Are they still meaningful to us? Like, why do we look at dinosaur bones? So this is kind of a weird and all over the place story. It seems that way, but then when you get to the end, you're like, okay, this is what the story's about, and it's a lot of fun. 176 people you become before God. So this is a story that is the most conceptual. This is more conceptual and arguably harder to like. How do I even write this? Whenever I was like coming up with it, this is a story that I ended up using a NPC generator. I created an old NPC generator. This is going back to D&D again, where I created a RNG pool for every attribute you can think of that you'd want to see for like, if you need to click a button, like I need an NPC to be in the end for the players to talk to. I created one that, does all the normal attributes, personality traits, what race and class are they. But then I just kept going, and I was like, I created pools for like quirks, fears, like phobias. Like there's all these crazy phobias I learned about by making this tool, where I basically created a random number generator and then a VLOOKUP. So I have the second tab is all the results. So there's like pools that are like names, which the name pool is like basically 40 syllables, and then you combine them in different ways. You come up with crazy fantasy names, which is actually directly from the D&D Player's Handbook. And then all the classes, fighter, cleric, wizard, sorcerer, warlock. And then you get into the longer ones like story hooks. So there's a really good content generator for D&D that's been around a long time called Donjon generator. If you Google that, 5e generator. And you can generate story hooks, you can generate entire ends. And now with the AI and stuff, I'm sure it's even crazier. But I was using this stuff back in like 2015. So yeah, basically I created my own generator in an Excel Google sheet. And I still have it. I use it occasionally. But when I was coming up with this story, so there's two things. I use an NPC generator to help me generate this story in the sense that I have to come up with 176 souls. I guess I haven't even read the pitch yet. A treasure hunter buys a mystic puzzle sphere at a bazaar. So that's very Clive Barkerian. This is like, the Lament configuration, the puzzle box that summons the Cenobites and Hellraiser. This is kind of my take on that, but it's not as dark and crazy. It contains 176 lives. He solves them all in one rip-roaring psychic experience, becoming warrior, mother, heretic, saint, child, corpse, and everything in between. Art by Keisuke Tsushida. So this is another one that this story only exists because I found this art. It's a really cool little painting of a sphere, like a puzzle sphere. It's like a Rubik's Cube, but it's a sphere, and there's more faces, and they're literally faces. So each panel is a face, and this is very Clive Barkerian, where it's just like these are like little freak people. And the more you look at it, the more interesting it becomes. But I created this story as like, this is the mystic object that is going to be in this story. And then I went and counted the like dimensions here. It's like how many faces are vertical and horizontal. And I came up with 16 by 11. So it's 176 if you multiply that. And I was like, that's the number. This number is story number 17 in Anthology. So the idea is he gets this puzzle sphere, he goes back, and then as soon as he starts to solve it, boom, we're off to the races. I created in the middle of this story, and I say it's very conceptual because this sounds weird, and it's like, did you even write a story? Like, what is this? And in the middle of this story, I create a bulleted list from number 1 to number 176, and to help me like brainstorm and come up with ideas for that, I did this NPC generator 176 times, meaning on Excel, if you just click the checkbox, you edit any cell, it regenerates all the cells with new numbers and the RNG triggers. So I did 176 turns on the NPC generator. And again, it's everything from personality traits to quirks and fears and flaws to the Enneagram, the MBTI, the Carl Jung archetype, your favorite David Bowie album. That's like the last kind of like joke one where I put all 21 of Bowie's albums in the NPC generator, and it chooses one every time. So it's like NPC generator, you'll get like a turn that says Dwarven Paladin who's afraid of dogs, whose past adventure is that he helped free a ghost from imprisonment in like a lost dungeon, and his favorite Bowie album is Scary Monsters and Super Freaks. They're super creeps. Stuff like that. So then it's not meant to be like a literal, like you copy and paste this entire NPC. It's meant to be like a brainstorming tool and like a thing you can glance at if you're DMing and be like, okay, I got a Dwarven Paladin, da 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 da. Okay, he's afraid of dogs. That's interesting. I'll use that. And then you just move on and you have the character with you. You don't have to look at like the Carl Jung archetype and stuff. That's all just there. It's all optional. So the way that I use this is I basically generated it 176 times over a few days. And I took like one aspect, one interesting tidbit or a few, and combined them. And then the meat of this story is 176 sentences, some of them longer than others, obviously. Of each of these sentences is like a mental story hook into trying to cyclically showcase that this character is like living all these lives. And then by the end, when he like consolidates everything and he gets out of the spell, or he like blinks and he's lived 176 lives, it has this profound effect on his worldview. And that's like what the story's about. So I'm kind of like just explaining the full story here, but it is very conceptual and weird. And it has a very provocative title. So this is one of the stories that I don't know if it fully works, but the thing I would say is it could be read almost like, and this is what I was thinking when I was like revising it, earlier this month. It can be thought of as like, think of these 176 nodes as your own story hooks or your own inspirations for ideas. Because each one is basically like, it's only one sentence, so how much can you really know? But it's like some of them are so provocative and so weird. And not all of the 176 lives that he lives are technically people, quote unquote, or humans, right? So there's all sorts of fantastical stuff he encounters too. So this is meant to be like a story that almost like inspires you to like, how do you brainstorm ideas? How do you come up with characters? And maybe you can get a few ideas from this story for your own, purposes. In addition to it being like a story you want to connect to and relate to the character and understand what they're going through, obviously. But again, very conceptual story. This story exists literally because of Kisuke Tsushida's art. And I actually don't know how old this art is. I don't even know if this is someone that I like followed on Twitter or that somebody else posted their art. But it's just a really cool, really, really cool art piece that I got inspired by. All right, so now we get to the last. This is number 18. So we're down to the last 5 stories. So Devilcree and Accursed Arsenal are 2 of my favorites in the whole collection because they're like really like conventional dark fantasy, like classic Dylan stories. Like Accursed Arsenal and Devilcree are both stories that would appear on Thresholds of Transformation for sure. So Devilcree, however you want to say it. Devilry is like kind of if you take away the C, it's like that's a word, and then Devilcree. A god emperor dies on the battlefield, and his 3 witches and consorts rush to his aid with a dangerous spell. This is a really fun story. It's like a medieval battle type situation, and the witches. This is the only story I think that's actually not modern day. This is ancient world, medieval. It's partly inspired by Warhammer fantasy. And the idea is the god emperor is fighting on the battlefield, and these 3 witches are at their cauldron, casting spells and like putting in implements to help the distant battlefield, right? So this story starts off with them at their cauldron. They're helping him fight, and then they realize the battle's losing. They hear a devil cry. They hear a god cry out in death, and they have to go act and start preparation of a very dangerous spell that's going to cost them. And they have to do it because this is not only the god emperor, this is their husband. They're kind of like sister wives, and the relationship and that dynamic between the 3 witches is kind of the meat and the heart of the story. This one I don't want to spoil or say much more on, but I think that pitch kind of delivers a pretty punchy concept that I think people will enjoy. Puppet Meisters, sorry. This is a really fun story. It's 10,000 words. So this is like a micro novella almost. It's a pretty long short story. It's like 3 or 2 short stories in one. There's basically 7 characters. Well, if you don't count the puppets that I have to like really cover. So it's pretty long, but it's satisfying. It's definitely worth its weight. Puppet Meisters is inspired by Puppet Master. So Puppet Master is a horror what is it, Full Moon Studios horror series. There's like 9 Puppet Master movies. And the lore of Puppet Master is me and one of my good friends in elementary school that's like one of those core memories of watching a horror movie too soon when you're too young. We were watching AMC used to have Friday night Fright Nights where they'd play horror movies on Friday nights. And we were at a sleepover at his house, and we started watching Puppet Master in like the middle of the movie. We just turned it on, and it was the leech scene. If you've seen Puppet Master, it's the leech scene where the guy's tied to the bed, and like it's pretty gnarly. And we got freaked out, and we like turned it off and didn't turn it back on. And I literally didn't even think about Puppet Master for years. But we still talk about that, where it's just like that was crazy. So it's funny because I have this like kind of. I had a real fear, and I still have like that's one of my phobias is like puppets and dolls kind of like unnerve me to like a large degree. Which, as if you're writing horror, it's like you have to lean into stuff like that. So then I was like, I got to write my own Puppet Master story. So in preparation for this story, I watched what I didn't rewatch them. I watched them for the first time. Technically, I'd never watched Puppet Master. I only saw that one scene. I've watched all the Puppet Master movies, and guess what? They're actually really good. The first 3 movies are legitimately good to great horror movies, depending on like your sensibility, especially for their budget and like kind of the times, like late 80s, early 90s. Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge is actually a masterpiece. It's the lore of the Puppet Master, which I don't want to get into the full lore, but the idea is, okay, the Puppet Master movie, the first one, it's like these psychic figures, kind of like they're magicians, psychic figures, or people who do debunk psychic phenomena. They go to a convention center, and they're like, there's some force here that we need to investigate. And it turns out there's puppets there that are being controlled by a puppet master that's trying to kill all of these psychic figures because they're getting too close to the truth. They're getting too close to the secret of how to make puppets. And it's like, oh, puppets, what are you talking about? Why is that important? The lore is during World War II, there was a Jewish puppet master that was using his like, innate magical arts to create these puppets. And he originally was making puppet shows for kids, and he was like entertaining the community. Third Reich happens. The Nazis start rounding everybody up. His people get killed. It's a tragedy. In Toulon's Revenge, the third puppet master gets into the full lore of this, but it's all implied in the first movie. And he basically he creates the puppets out of the souls of his dead comrades that were fighting the Nazis to continue the fight. So the puppets are fighting the Nazis. And then in the beginning of the movie, which Puppet Master 1, it's modern day, the puppet master is an old man, and the Nazis, neo-Nazis, basically, modern day Nazis, come to kill him, or to capture him. And then he ends up killing himself to hide the secret of the puppet master. So this isn't a huge spoiler. It's the very beginning of Puppet Master 1, but the idea is the puppets are these killer puppets are villains in the story, but they actually come from a place of tragedy, and it's a fallen like magician that had originally used his magic for good, but the Nazis corrupted him into creating these killer puppets that then they take on a life of their own and they're immortal. And of course, the Nazis want the magic because they want to create golems to attack and fight their wars for them. So that's the Puppet Master. That's what I'm saying. Like the reason I go into that is because like Puppet Master's lore is actually really cool. The movies are cool. The movies are really good. It's low budget, but it's really creepy. The puppet effects are incredible. So that's all preamble to say my story is 5 conmen show up to a convention center under mysterious circumstances. A cabal of billionaires hire a magician with killer puppets to slaughter them for live betting entertainment. So I kind of take that idea, and this is another stream type thing where it's like, or like surveillance, where these conmen, and they're not all conmen, I'm just saying conmen, but like these 5 figures here, kind of like freelance figures that help people or like, set up deals, entrepreneurs. They're kind of shifty what they do. But the main character, the protagonist that we take the perspective of the most, is an actual like warlock that has real power that I could kind of show you through the course of the story. And he started to, he's trying to make a YouTube channel to show his powers, and he's like kind of struggling. So he comes to the convention center because there's this promise of money. It's kind of mysterious circumstances, but they all like need the money, they need the exposure, they need new clients. So they all show up, and then the convention center is a death trap, and there's this cabal of billionaires. Some of them have been shafted or like hurt by these con men before, so they want revenge. And then I have a puppet master character that's kind of the lore and commentary of this story is, you know, each gradation of this situation, is being there's a gradation and an escalation of puppet masters. So the billionaires are puppet mastering the puppet master, who's puppet mastering the puppets themselves, and then the puppets are playing and like, I mean, the core of the story is the violent encounters with the puppets, obviously, and the puppets are playing and manipulating and puppeteering these con men. But a few of the characters, one of the characters in particular, you know, he has a little bit of ability. He's able to fight back. So this story is a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites for sure in the whole collection. It's also very violent and visceral, so get ready for that. But I would recommend the Puppet Master movies ultimately, and this is my love letter to the Puppet Master movies. So this is story number 20, and this is kind of the end of the next three after this are kind of microfictions or like extra stories that I came up with on the end to get to 23, because it was originally, Anthology was originally a volume. I was going to do 10 stories, like 10 good Books of Blood style stories. And, you know, maybe I come up with more later, but as I was making the outline, creating that Google Doc with all the material, I realized I have more ideas than, you know, could fit the receptacle I originally intended. So then it became 20 stories, and it came up, you know, bled a little bit more, and it's 23. So there's this is kind of like the end of what was initially a volume of 10 and a volume of 10. And then I came up with a few more. So Subway Head is like our capstone kind of the 20. It's 1,800 words. So we go from a really long one to a pretty short one to like a little rhythm here. Subway Head. Introverted creative show encounters a strange cryptid on the subway that he deems Subway Head. He watches its behavior and tries to determine the truth of its existence. So this is kind of a simplistic story. It's just a subway ride, but this character sees this figure, and he has some abilities. So he's able to see into the other worlds. Show is another character that I've used before in other stories. It's also the inspiration for Shareya, the Liquid Swordsman, one of my favorite and most well-developed D&D characters that went from level 1 to level 20. But Shareya is unrelated to this show. The show that I created initially was inspired by when I used to walk home from work in Houston downtown. I walked on an overpass every day, sometimes at night. And I used to like imagine, like, what if there was like a creature? I came up with a story eventually called The Creature Under the Overpass. And it's like, what if there was a creature watching me under the overpass every day? And like, I kept looking in the corners to try to see something. And the story deals with like one day he sees this figure staring at him, and he has this psychic encounter that basically awakens his ability to see into the psychic invisible worlds. So Subway Head's technically a sequel to that story, The Creature Under the Overpass, where this introverted creative show, he's like listening to music, he's on the subway. He's taking the subway now. He's not walking anymore. So it's like he's moved up in life. He's moved cities. What's going on with him? Not all that lore is revealed, but he has this ability to see figures now. So when he sees this cryptid, he doesn't panic. He sees stuff like this kind of frequently. But this is still a strange creature, and he's trying to figure out what it is. And it's kind of like it's an intellectual exercise. And this is another language feast where I just get to have a lot of fun inside this person's head. And his observation of the cryptid Subway Head, which is another fun combined word, Subway Head. So the last three here, I'll just go through them quickly. It's nightmarish. A napping woman is attacked by the noonday demon and defended by her cat. It's inspired by this. There's many variations on this painting of the little daemon sitting on the chest of the dreamer, and kind of basically the conception of having a nightmare is there's like a creature sitting on your chest, or like a sleep paralysis demon. So this story is about the fact that those demons may exist, and also about the fact that cats, this is something I've written about before, cats can see ghosts, and they can interact with the invisible worlds in ways that we can't really comprehend. And I have a little veneration to the black cat in this slideshow here. It's a lot of fun. So this is a really fun story. I get to get into the mindset of both a demon and a cat, and kind of give you a dualistic view of like how they think about interacting with humans. Because cats don't see humans like, the cat is going to defend the woman not because she's its owner, because the cat sees the woman as a cat, and I need to protect my comrade. And the demon sees the human as a meal. So that's like what this story is about. And it's another short one. It's only 1,800 words. And this art by Nikolai Abraham at Bildegard is another example of like, this art actually really freaks me out and is really scary. So I'm always inspired by stuff like that. It's like he's actually seeing into another reality when you painted this. Strawberry Meadow. This is my like kind of micro smutty story. It's a very sexual story. A young couple races through a meadow during a majestic lightning storm. The passion between them and the violence in the sky are building toward the same crescendo. So this is a fun story about like a young couple just in love, sublime moment. They're just having fun, but there's a time and place for everything, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes I don't want to spoil this story, but it's a lot of fun. A Better World. An elementary school class takes a field trip to an old crash-landed UFO in the mountains of Hungary. The ship has been here for decades. The children have questions. The ship might still have answers. So Better World's the full capstone, the 23rd story, the last one in Anthologee. And this is an actual place. I don't know if it's in Hungary, it's in Eastern Europe, but it's like this old communist monument that looks like a flying saucer. And if you go in, it's like disheveled. It basically looks like if you watch like Jurassic Park 3, this is a deep cut reference, I guess. Whenever Dr. Grant and like the explorers in Jurassic Park 3 are visiting the old rundown engine, which is like the evil Jurassic Park Corporation and Jurassic Park World, the old engine like scientist facilities where it's like everything's overgrown, but there's like broken beakers still on the lab tables and stuff. This old communist monument has like old like murals and meeting rooms in there, and you can go visit it. And it's the top of this like hill mountains. It looks like a UFO. I like looked at a bunch of art of this, and I was like, this is fascinating. So I took that idea, and this is also a really fantastical story in the sense that if there was a crash-landed UFO, in what world that we know would the governments that had control over its location ever allow that to stay there and not recover it and hide the technology, steal as much as they could, take everything? In what world would a crash-landed UFO become like a little museum that an elementary school class can take a field trip to? Well, in my world, where things are cooler and more fantastical and humans make decisions that are for the good of all, I guess. So it's a better world because, just the fact that this crash-landed UFO is a museum, and the fact that I'm releasing this, it coincides with the world that we're about to get disclosure about UFOs and everything. That wasn't something I was thinking about when I wrote this in 2024, but here we are. This is a really hopeful story. I wanted to end Anthologee on like kind of a hopeful note, and it's a fun story. It's just a teacher and her class, and the class is asking questions, and the teacher is kind of explaining the cosmology of what we recovered about this UFO and what we think about the civilization that it belonged to and like who they were and their story, and the children are very curious about it. So it's a pretty fun story, and it also reveals some of my thoughts about the future of technology and the future of like how we treat civilizations, and like the concept of a primordial or like a proto-civilization that had all this crazy technology and advanced philosophy, but they end up falling. Babylon, Atlantis, Ancient Apocalypse. If you watch that, like all that stuff is like, it's real, and like we should be thinking about it. And this is me doing a thought experiment on like, how would a teacher explain those things to an elementary school class, and what type of ideas do we have about the races or the progenitor races that came before us, and how we can learn from them and not repeat their mistakes. And that's why it's called A Better World, obviously. So that's the rundown of all the stories of Moon Mania. It's 13 in all. And I'll read these last quotes. So all three witches felt it before they heard it. The death cry of a god. That's from Devil Cry. Perhaps a Bildegard enjoyed feasting on the dreams of women simply because their dreams tasted best. That's from Nightmarish. And yes, I do call the demon in Nightmarish a Bildegard, which is the name of that artist who drew that. So that's just like my homage to him. He was a dog named Mogwai who sometimes saw gnomes huddling in the corner of the backyard, but only ever when the door was closed or when he was chained up. That's one of the, again, not all people, although I think of dogs as people. 176 people you become before God. Yeah, one of those faces on there was a was a dog that saw gnomes. It could give you some evidence and reason to why that dog may have appeared in that puzzle sphere. Dino necromancy was long ago proved impossible. Unfortunately, their anima has fled the planet. That's Master Jamaz explaining how, no, we cannot perform necromancy on these dinosaur bones and bring them back. I'm sorry. 1,000-year education in the noble and time-honored tradition of puppet mastery. And what do I have to show for it beyond another 30 million I don't know how to spend and another quadruple homicide on my conscience? It's from Puppet Meisters. A half-flayed man sits upon a gleaming golden throne, slick with his lifebloods. On his face is affixed a demonic iron mask, wide-eyed and long-toothed. That's from Heen. His vortex of teeth was triangular and echoed, akin to a deep-sea fish or the xenomorph. His smile was double-lipped and harshly sharp, altogether resembling a massacre. That's from Subway Head. The sight of Kali's disposition brought a heavy rain to Shiva's eyes, and a heavier rage. That's Shiva Kali. Some call them angels, others call them aliens. E.T., shadows, travelers, daemons, a better world. So we got to meet the author here. I got my tool shirt there. For those you know, you know. Anthologee is my debut collection, 93,000, just kind of like a little bit of a one-liner from the introduction. And then I have my About the Author. These are my novels you can go check out. My author website's just myname.com. And then, yeah, in reading and writing, and it's all things, please use your soul authority, Godspeed, sign off. And then these are the cover prototypes. So we can go through these real quick. So this is the cemetery entrance. This is what appears at the beginning, but now Anthologee's been added. And I really love the flush, how it's flush and the O perfectly coincides with the wreath. I actually spent a lot of time. I use Krita. It's a free open source digital editing software to create these covers and add this text and like messing with the effects. You know, it's like beveled and have an outline, and I had to like resize that for a little bit of good time to get that wreath right. But I really like this one. It's like entering the stories. It's a really liminal kind of like strange. Any painting without people in it, it always has that little like feeling, right? But that's the kind of feeling that I want for Anthologee. And there's also this like black, I guess that's like the end of this, but it's like only shows up one side. It's kind of like off kilter, and like this isn't perfectly lined up because in order to get the O around that, I had to like favor a little bit more on the right side, but that's on purpose, really. Everything's a little bit off kilter, which I really like this one. I think this is the favorite. That's why it's first, but I haven't decided yet what the cover will be. This is another Caspar David Friedrich. This is Abbey in the Oakwood. This one's great because these gnarly trees look like fingers reaching up, or like, you know, the darkness bleeding into the sky, the gradations of darkness to gray to light here in the cover. This literally looks like a canvas. There's like little like gnome figure, like mushroom people, and like smaller plants down here. It's a cross. It's a cross in both of them. If you see the cross there, it's a cross there. It's obelisk. Actually, that's fascinating. There are two people here. I haven't even noticed that, honestly. That's a man and a woman looking into the cemetery. Wow, I never even saw that. I thought that was just part of the crenellation or the obelisk there. Wow, that's awesome. Dylan, you're not very observant. But it's like, okay, I didn't notice that, but I did notice this. If you look at these, this looks like eyes down there. I guess I can't zoom in that well. That's a figure in like the base of this abbey, right? It's pretty creepy. And then the last one is the Valley of the Shadow of Death by John Martin. And it's like kind of like a knight or like traveler in the abyss of this. And this painting is reversed, so I had to mirror this to get this to where it could be like a long cover. Like this is my wraparound cover concept. So you said John Martin's name is reversed there. Kind of looks weird, but I left that in for that reason. But yeah, this one's another good one. My mom said she likes this one best, the wraparound. And I really like the duality of the light. There's light in that part of the cavern that he's heading that way. It's like reading the book. This is the open page and the back is the light. So it's like by the time you read Anthologee, you go from the darkness to the light. All three of these are really good. I think any one of them could work perfectly for the title or for the cover. So I don't know which one I'm going to choose yet, but these are the prototypes. I have a Walt Whitman little poem here, and then this is my own little quote from the introduction. I'll read this Walt Whitman. So this Walt Whitman quote was part of the mood board and lore, and it was primarily inspirational for me when I was writing the 176 people that you become before God. And when you read the poem, you'll understand why. Oh, living always, always dying. O living always, always dying. O the burials of me past and present. O me while I stride ahead, material, visible, imperious as ever. O me what I was for years, now dead. I lament not, I am content. O to disengage myself from those corpses of me, which I turn and look at where I cast them. To pass on, O living, always living, and leave the corpses behind. Walt Whitman. So that was one where I was like, okay, to live 176 lives, like you have to keep moving on. You have to keep like forgetting about what you just were. And like it's almost like reincarnating 176 times in 1 second. Like what kind of psychic experience would that would be? And I think Whitman kind of captures a feeling there. It's like disengaging. It's like, I lament not, I am content, I'm disengaging, always living. The way he uses parentheses here, like this is one of those poems. This is true of all great poets. You could just read it forever. There's an infinite amount of material in here, and it's just like, it's a really good little poem. And then I have some alternative covers down here, which is just like, these are other art pieces that were in my mood board for this. And most of these don't work as covers. Some of them do work as covers. I think I could consider them, but they're centered in such a way where I couldn't really make this a cover unless it was a wraparound. And then this would be on the spine and stuff. So it doesn't really work. There's Old Nightmare again. This is a great one. This is one where I don't think Anthology fully earns how sublime this looks. But that could maybe be like Anthology 2, right? This would be the cover in volume 2, where it's like, if you actually look close at this picture, it's pretty insane. This is Michelangelo's The Torment of St. Anthony, which he created. He drew this when he was like 12. Like Michelangelo, touched by God. But this is a fun one, and I've theorized this as this could be a good cover for maybe not anthology, but like another short story collection where you write stories about holy men going into like exorcisms or going into face demons. And how holy men are the ultimate target of demons, not just because they're the soldiers of God that are fighting against them, but because holy men represent the ultimate quarry or meal for a demon, in the sense that demons are sadistic, meaning they don't just like want to kill you or manipulate you into like doing bad things. They want to take the most holy and like sacred figures and sacred ideas and souls and profane them and corrupt them. There's nothing more satisfying to a demon than to take a holy man and corrupt him down. And my first contact with that was really like The Monk. If you read The Monk, it's a really good like medieval Gothic book. We read it in school. But the idea of like a holy man committing sins and the demons influencing him to do it, it's like, yeah, that's who they want more than anyone. Whereas the average religious person, the unreligious person, they may not have as much influence over, or they don't have as much of a desire to corrupt. So I really like this as like a potential cover for that type of collection if I ever come up with something like that. But it's like, that's how art can inspire storytelling. And then this last one here, this one's great. The cat's being instructed in the art of mouse hunting by mouse catching by an owl, Lombard School, artist unknown. It's a bunch of like freak cats. Some of them are crashing out, other ones are playing music, and there's like a little like demon fairy guy playing a horn out of his butt while the owl is completely locked in as the instructor. And then you think of this is kind of like the protagonist is the author, or the reader, the viewer, the cat with his back turned actually studying the book. And then we have the last one with this William Blake. This is one of his drawings or paintings that he did for Dante's Inferno. So this is Virgil and Dante in hell, going to the different circles of hell and seeing the sufferers. And these are the schismatics and sowers of discord who, you know, they've lost limbs and is headless, he doesn't have arms, Satan's exulting over them. It's just like a really like kind of sublime, creepy, weird painting. I don't think it would work as the cover, but it's a good like vibe setter as well. So yeah, you can view all these on my website, and then you can visit my website to look at my other books, and then the pre-order will be coming soon as I finish revisions and get it uploaded into my indie publishing platform. So yeah, that's Anthology. Thanks for listening, and this is author diary number 2, devoted entirely to this anthology and this release upcoming. I'm having a lot of fun going back and revising the stories, although there's not a ton of work I have to do, because again, the fact that I wrote all these with the intention to submit them to magazines means every story was basically already on a draft 4 to 5 and was really strong, because I had to make them strong enough to give me a good chance to get published in these magazines. So my hit rate was 4 out of 15. So not bad. I got a few published and was able to go through that process. And then the rest of them now are being compiled and will be available here pretty soon. So This is Dylan Oros, your friendly neighborhood writer, signing off. This has been Author Diary number 2, Anthology.